Mike and Arlen, our Philippine journey. Thank you so much for dropping by. We really appreciate your time. Age gap relationships. I actually started working on this video a couple weeks ago, but I had to do a lot of research to feel like I was being straight up as much as possible. But what's the big deal? Few things you might not quite understand, but let's talk about it.
Why'd you have to go? I guess this world's too slow for you. I think there's beauty in the gray, the cold, but you just want the gold. And there's no way I can beat it, cause I got no chance, no chance when it comes to her. She got the glitter and the fame, and I just wasn't enough.
Okay, age gap relationships. There are different definitions of what is an age gap relationship. All right. There are those people that say it's X number of years and then X more and then whatever. But they are referring to a large number of years that separate two people, whether they're married, whether they're partnered, whatever. So I was watching a video a couple weeks ago, and this individual was talking about how gross age gap relationships are and how it's so weird to see old men with young girls and that it's this and that. I mean, he had like 100 negative, no, not 100, okay, but a dozen negative comments and quite frankly blamed Americans for perpetuating and creating these age gap scenarios here in the Philippines. And I thought that just doesn't seem right to me. It really and truly doesn't. So I started to do a little bit of looking. And here's what you come up with. First off, long before America was colonized, the British were doing age gap relationships. And before that, even in medieval times, age gap relationships existed in medieval Europe. But guess who really dates back? And, here's the deal. We tend to only talk about data that we can pull up. And one of the things that people don't talk about, one of the things that people don't bother to explain is that certain cultures did not keep records way, way, way back. Some cultures kept even more records. But guess what? In Asia, age gap relationships have existed since before the Edo period. And were they legitimate then? Because you're going to say, in Europe, a lot of age gap relationships, like when King William married Queen Adelaide, there was a 37-year age gap. Okay. And most of that was a political situation about joining the two families, creating a uh, a, a route of convenience between the two countries, a unification of means, it was economic, whatever. But what's interesting in those is that Adelaide was already a noble in her own country, and that's two noble people. But if you look back, there are many instances where British nobles, but they're so far down the line, had age gap relationships. Now, big deal. They didn't keep great records. And so others don't keep great records. But is there data that shows that Asians did it way back before the Edo period? Okay, yes. Japanese shoguns nobles, royal families, yes, they had age gap. They may have married, okay, and this was not uncommon at all to marry a noblewoman in an arranged marriage and then have concubines that were much, much younger. Now, it also happened in the normal step of life because women want to upgrade. They're looking out for just the, you can throw that whole scenario of hegemony out and just say, something, people want to rise to the top to the best of their abilities. And what is the data show or say, or what do the psychologists say about age gap relationships is that generally it's because people want a successful life. And their odds of having a successful life are sometimes, not always, but sometimes joined to the fact that their partner is experienced, mature, financially secure, whatever. There's lots of reasons. But the point there is that the Asians were doing it, I don't know, God, close to 1,000 years ago. So it's not Americans, just because I hear this comment is just not uncommon at all. That it's so gross to see an old guy holding hands with a young girl at the mall that could be his granddaughter. Well, you know what? That's your opinion. That may be how you feel, but you don't know how old that person is. I mean, I know Filipino women in their mid 30s that still look like they're in their early 20s. Japanese women as well. Chinese women as well. Okay? It's not unusual. How do you judge these things? It's whatever you want to say. It is what it is. Americans didn't do it. Don't blame the GIs for coming over and hooking up with young women. All right. Now, I'm not talking about hooking up with women under the age of maturity. All right. I'm talking about legal, realistic expectations. Are there people that go outside those norms? Obviously, it happens in every country. Look at the Roma, all right? The travelers are in both Britain and in the EU, all right? Where young girls literally have their own festivals to meet men. And sometimes those are older, more established men. Their whole idea is to find a better mate. Yeah. So age gap relationships, it's kind of funny. This morning at breakfast, I met with a good friend of mine, Scott. Now, Scott has a 20 plus year age gap in his marriage. And one of the things we talked about is people don't recognize how much we do have in common with our wives. Scott and I were talking about, yeah, I can talk to Arlene about American politics. I can talk to her about raising my daughter. I can talk to her about everything. And he's saying the same thing about his wife, that they have in depth conversations. Don't just listen to these people that try and tell you Filipinas are too simple or too stupid. That's not true. There are lots of college educated, higher degree educated, experienced, worthwhile people here in the Philippines, Filipinos and Filipinas. Okay? You just have to find the right one. Now, can you look at age gap relationships in any way blaming somebody for this perversion? No, you can't. It's been around, I bet, since cavemen. All right? They want the strongest caveman, the best caveman, the one that's going to put a dead boar on the fire, all right? That's going to protect that woman. This applies all the way across time. Now, Are there challenges in age gap relationships? Sure. I'm sure that there are. Okay. But it existed long before the American GIs got here. It existed long before the Spanish got here to the Philippines, and it will exist long after we put men on Mars, as far as I'm concerned. It is just going to be around. It's a natural thing. Women strive to improve their odds, improve their families' odds. Men strive to live in accordance to their own primal urges. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But age gap relationships, don't just pew pew them. Look in your family history. Look at the past. The Greeks had age gap relationships. The Italians had age gap relationships. All of the EU, the Romans had age gap relationships. The British as well. I mean, I did a lot of research and documented. Now, what we do see is we see social media, okay, looking at these age gap relationships. And we only see it amongst the rich and famous or the movie stars, because there are multiple. I mean, look at Kushner and Demi Moore. Okay, there's one. Look at Cher, for God's sakes. There's one. All right. Age gap relationships go in both directions. It happens in both ways. Okay. It happens everywhere. It's not such a negative issue. It shouldn't be blamed on anyone. You know, you don't hear a lot about Korean age gap relationships because most of you can't tell the difference between a healthy, well-kept 50-year-old Korean man and a 35-year-old Korean man. And it's okay to see a 35-year-old Korean with a 25-year-old woman. That's not a big age gap. But you don't know how old they are. You don't know how old that woman is. I'm just saying sometimes we mistake visual cues, and we should admit that that happens. I don't know. I don't think that age gap relationships are ugly. I don't think that people should be put down for them. I also feel that there are, without a doubt, people that take advantage of immature young women, people who don't provide for the future of that age gap relationship. You know, if you're going to be in a 20 plus year age gap relationship, what kind of man are you if you don't provide for their future? Because for you to outlive them is an absolute fantasy. It's just not going to happen 90% of the time. And when it doesn't happen, it's because of a tragic issue like an accident or a disease process or something like that. You know, we as a whole, we want to get information. We want to understand information. I would tell people, I know people in the US that are in age gap relationships, and they're just fine. Absolutely fine. I know age gap relationships where the woman is significantly older than the man, and I know age gap relationships where the man is significantly older than the women. What I think cues people is when they see it's a young woman. Well, some of you have a point, okay? I can't see how it works, all right, with an 18, 19, 20-year old, all right? I can't see how that works, but for some it does. It's obvious. It's been around. There's a Philippine senator, if I'm not mistaken, who just married a lawyer who's like 30 years younger than she is. I could be off by a few years, okay? He's in his 80s and she's in her like her 40s, okay? That's a big age gap relationship, but people don't say shit about that, do they? All right. It's okay if it's this way or that way, if they're older. Are we assuming that young women can't be educated enough? Are we assuming that women have that, when a Filipino woman's 23 years old, she has an undergraduate degree in chemical engineering? Are you going to assume she's stupid? Too stupid to be in a relationship? She's not mature enough? That's a tough, tough call as far as I'm concerned. But you know something? In the comments below, let's try and rationalize this. Let's try and be realistic. And we'll keep an open mind to everything that you say. Otherwise, please do subscribe, hit the thumbs up. We're going to be talking in our next video about the condo market and the crash that is looming in the near future. That's going to be interesting. Also, I have a complete fee schedule on cardiac procedures done here in the Philippines at the premier coronary heart institute, and how much it costs. And we're going to compare that. Scott's going to get us some information from the U.S. Scott's heavily involved in this area, and I'm not going to say a whole lot. It's his private life, but he's going to get me the fee schedule for some of the hospitals that he's intimately involved with when it comes to coronary care. That is something we're working on as well. So otherwise, we want to say thanks and have a great day. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.